could have gone home. All he had to do was say a few words and he'd walk out alive. Not run, not bribe anyone, not even win an argument, just say the words. But he's 86 years old, and he's not going to. Smyrna's waking up around him, dock ropes creaking, bakers throwing open shutters, incense smoke drifting up toward the festival grounds. And right through the middle of all that, guards are walking an old man toward the worst day of his life. His name is Polycarp, and the city's put one sentence in front of him, like a key to a locked door. Swear by Caesar. Say it. Do the gesture. Go home. If he refuses, the whole city's going to watch what happens next. This is the story of a crash. A Roman city demanding loyalty. A Christian bishop who won't fake it. Once those two things meet, everything tightens. Officials, crowds, law, spectacle. And one old man's death becomes a story the early church tells for generations. Here's what most people miss. Smyrna's church didn't get blindsided by this. Open up the book of Revelation. One of the 7 letters is to them. The words aren't gentle. They talk about suffering, poverty, people lying about them, some of them getting thrown in prison. And then comes the line the church there never forgot. Be faithful unto death, and I will give you the crown of life. That's not a prediction about Polycarp by name. It's the air Smyrna's church was already breathing. They'd been told, if you stay faithful here, it's going to cost you. So when the cost finally came, they weren't surprised by the shape of it. Polycarp isn't a random Christian. He's the bishop, the teacher, the face of the church in Smyrna. And he's something else too. Irenaeus tells us Polycarp had been taught by apostles. He'd known the apostle John personally. That wasn't a legend the church made up later. That was living memory. So when people in Smyrna looked at this old man, they were looking at a direct link back to the men who walked with Jesus. Which means his decision wasn't just his. If he caved, believers everywhere would read one lesson. If he stood firm, they'd read another. Now picture the city. Smyrna sits on the Aegean coast in Roman Asia. Ships come and go all day, hauling oil and wine and grain and gossip and news from Rome. The harbour feeds the markets feed the squares feed the pride. Roads climb from the lower city up toward Pagos Hill. Colonnades line the public spaces. Temples and altars are right out there in the open. In Smyrna, you don't tuck your loyalties away in private. You put them in stone. If you stand in modern Izmir today, you can still walk through the ruins of Smyrna's old agora. Columns, arches, a city that wanted to be seen being important. And here's what Smyrna was proudest of. Not the harbour, not the trade. Its loyalty to Rome. Long before Polycarp's day, Smyrna had built a temple to Rome itself. And in the year 26, under Tiberius, the city won the right to host an imperial temple for the whole province. That wasn't a souvenir. It was rank. It told every other city on the coast, "We know where power lives." So in Smyrna, religion isn't a private thing. Ritual, loyalty, public peace, they're all tied together. The Romans had a phrase for it, Pax Deorum, the peace of the gods. The idea was simple, keep the gods happy, and the city stays safe. Stop feeding them sacrifices, and who knows what happens? Earthquake, famine, defeat, a bad harvest, a dead harbor. Now you understand why one tiny ritual mattered so much. A pinch of incense, an oath by Caesar's fortune, a few public words that say, Caesar is Lord. To a Roman, that sounded normal, just patriotism with a little smoke. To a Christian, it cut straight through the faith. Caesar could be honored as a ruler. Caesar could get taxes. Caesar could command armies. But Caesar isn't Lord the way Jesus is Lord. For Polycarp, that wasn't a word game. That was the line between worship and betrayal. So when Christians wouldn't do these little rituals, it didn't sound like personal conviction to their neighbors. It sounded like disorder, ingratitude, a threat to the city itself. That's the world Polycarp's got to walk into. By the time the guards bring Polycarp out, the city's already boiling. Festival energy is a thing, big crowds, big expectations, and nobody wants the show to stall. So a refusal in this setting doesn't land like a polite disagreement. It lands like an insult in front of the whole city. And the crowd already has a word for what Christians are. Atheists. I know, that sounds backwards, but hear it the way Smyrna heard it. Christians had no statue of their God, no image in a temple, no sacrifice for the city's protectors. They wouldn't honor the Nemesis who guarded justice. They wouldn't pray to Tyche, the city's luck. They wouldn't do any of the rituals that made the crowd feel safe under heaven. So to Smyrna, the charge wasn't, your private beliefs are wrong. It was, you're refusing the gods who keep us alive. And Polycarp isn't some hidden Christian. He's the teacher of Asia, the father of the Christians. The face of a movement the crowd thinks is loosening the bolts holding the city together. Voices rise, then they merge. A few angry shouts turn into chants. Chants turn into demands. Away with the atheists! Polycarp to the lion! Polycarp to the fire! The martyrdom of Polycarp says the whole stadium cried out as one voice. The crowd has no legal authority here, but in a Roman city, the crowd shapes the air the judge has to breathe. Fear turns into piety. Piety turns into pressure. Pressure turns into a demand for blood. Before any of this hits the stadium, there's a chain of custody. The account walks you through it. They find Polycarp, they arrest him, they move him under guard. A man named Herodes, an Irenarch, basically the city's officer of public order, stands at the bridge between the angry street and the official courtroom. On the way, they offer him a quiet deal, just a few words, a small gesture, a little incense. He doesn't have to make a scene, he just has to cooperate. He says, no. Calmly, plainly, and with every step, his road gets narrower, and the price of refusing gets higher. The hearing comes down to one thing, offered over and over. Recant in public and live. The crowd's roaring outside. Inside sits Statius Quadratus, proconsul of Asia. Scholars still debate the exact year, but the role's clear. He's the one chair in the room that can hand down a death sentence. He wants Polycarp to walk away alive. So he pushes him. Swear by the genius of Caesar, curse Christ. The demand's simple on purpose. Rome knows simple is powerful. No long confession, no theology debate, no need to convince the crowd Polycarp's changed his mind, just public words, in the right place, with the right witnesses. Say them and live. Call Caesar's fortune holy and walk out. Curse Christ, and the whole machine stops. Polycarp's answer is recorded almost word for word. 86 years I have served him, and he has done me no wrong. How then can I blaspheme my king who saved me? The proconsul pushes again. Polycarp says no again. And the room understands what's coming before anyone says it out loud. The stadium's where the law and the crowd finally lock together. It's not a neutral building, it's a stage, built to make Roman power visible. Philip of Tralles, called the Asiarch, runs the festival side of all this. The public games, the shows, the beast hunts are wrapping up, and now the crowd wants the bishop next. The Christian account says the fury spreads through the whole stadium, the pagan crowds pushing for it, and then it adds something painful. It says some people from the Jewish community also helped gather wood, even on the Sabbath. That detail needs to be handled carefully. Smyrna's Jewish community lived under their own pressures from Rome. After Jerusalem fell, Jews across the empire had to pay the fiscus Judaicus, the Jewish tax. But Judaism still had a recognized legal status. Christians, increasingly seen as a separate movement, no longer fit under that protection. So everybody in Smyrna's got tension pulling at them. Rome wants public loyalty. The pagan crowd wants the peace of the gods restored. Local officials want order. Some in the synagogue don't want to be confused with this new Christian movement. And right in the middle of all that stands Polycarp. The crowd pushes, the festival officials frame the show, the proconsul holds the sentence. And by now, that sentence is written on every face in the place. Polycarp prays out loud before they light the fire. The martyrdom of Polycarp keeps the whole prayer. He blesses God. He thanks God for being counted among the martyrs. He gives himself up willingly. Then the account slows down, like the witnesses themselves can't speed past what they think they saw. They light the fire. But the way the account tells it, the flames don't eat him right away. The fire bends around him, forms an arch, like the sail of a ship. It wraps him in a wall of flame. And inside it, they say he doesn't look like a man burning. He looks like bread baking, or gold and silver glowing in a furnace. For the early church, that imagery wasn't random. Bread pointed to offering, to the Eucharist. Gold and silver pointed to testing, to purification. This wasn't being written down as just a death. It was being written down as witness. Then comes the second wonder. The fire doesn't finish him. So an official tells the executioner to use a dagger, and when the blade goes in, the account says a sweet smell rises from the pyre, like frankincense, like precious spices, and so much blood pours out that it puts the fire out. Some manuscripts also describe a dove coming from the wound. A lot of scholars treat that line carefully. It might be a later addition from a copyist. But even setting that aside, the shape of the tradition is clear. The Church remembered Polycarp's death as a moment where heaven seemed to answer the violence without taking the suffering away. Modern historians read these signs the way you'd expect. They belong to a whole world of martyr literature, where supernatural details confirm the meaning of a death. The early church didn't hear them like a lab report. They heard them like a signature. God was with his servant. A life was being offered like a fragrant sacrifice. The fire could kill him, but the fire couldn't own the story. And the one thing the account never doubts is how he carried himself. Composed, prayerful, unbroken. The execution doesn't end the fight, it just changes the shape of it. A fight breaks out over his body. The Christians want to bury him with honor. Others push back, nervous about Christians gathering around a martyr's bones. In the end, the church in Smyrna picks up what's left of him and lays him to rest with care. And then they do something else. They write it down. The letter they send is careful in a very specific way. It honors Polycarp without putting him in Christ's place. Christ gets the worship. The martyr just gets remembered. That's the line, and they hold it. Then the letter starts traveling, through harbor routes, through church networks, from Smyrna to Philomelium, and out across the Mediterranean. Believers in other cities read it, and they hear the revelation line already humming underneath every page. Be faithful unto death. Not as a step-by-step prophecy, but as the horizon Smyrna's church had been living under all along, and now had lived into. One old bishop, one loud imperial city, one sentence he could have escaped, and a few words he refused to say. The harbour wind comes back at dusk. The smoke thins above the stadium. The stone streets empty out. And somewhere above the lower city, an oil lamp gets lit in a small room. A scribe sits down and starts copying a letter that's going to outlive every man who signed it. The city goes back to itself. The story doesn't. It travels.